So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by my friend Kate, who I've known for a long time. So I think since 2015 or 16, when we were both living in Oxford, and we met because I played volleyball for the university, and you were still living there after previously playing volleyball for the university. So yeah, if you want to give yourself an introduction, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Kate, and I guess as James said, yeah, we met when I was living in Oxford, and I'm originally Portuguese. I'm half Portuguese, half Kiwi. So my mum's Portuguese, my dad's from New Zealand. I will caveat this by saying I did live in Portugal pretty much pretty much my whole life until I was 18. But I did spend about a month between Australia, New Zealand, and America. So my accent is an absolute sort of international mess of an accent. But here we are. Yeah. And yeah, I guess I moved to the UK, which is still where I'm living now. And it's sort of my main experience of living abroad.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining me again, and we'll get into the podcast. So hello and welcome to section 1 of the podcast, all about getting there. So Kate, this is where we're going to ask you some questions about how you, or why you moved, or both, why you moved and how you moved to the UK predominantly, because that's probably your most travelling as an adult. I guess the living and moving around New Zealand was, I guess, for holidays with your parents, which we can get into a bit of understanding the cultural differences.
Yeah.
But let's go predominantly with moving to the UK. So you moved for studying originally?
Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of a funny story because so as I said, I did all my school in Portugal and like all my classes, everything in Portuguese. And when it came to like deciding like what to study at university, I think I told my parents I wanted to do English literature. And they are both English literature lecturers in Portugal. And they met when they were both actually sort of doing their sort of post, like, I don't know, doctorates or sort of studies when they were both in London. And so when I sort of said, oh, I'd like to study English literature, they were both sort of very much of the opinion that I shouldn't do it in Portugal and that I should move to England and give that a go. And yeah, I guess I figured why not? Obviously made sense to me. You'd rather than be the like big fish in a little pond studying it in Portugal, I'd sort of go and challenge myself a bit and go to the UK, where obviously at the time, obviously if you think I grew up speaking mostly in Portuguese, my English wasn't necessarily where it is today. So I would only speak in English with my dad when I was back home, and being like bilingual, naturally, I think one language is always a little bit stronger than the other. But yeah, I felt like, why not? Definitely like up for the challenge. So then I started looking into how, like, what would studying in the UK look like, how to even choose a university, like what would that actually look like? Process is very different to Portugal. Even timelines of like when to actually like start applying for university, like that was like the main thing that struck me, I think, at the time. I think thankfully I decided what I wanted to study in like September, October time of my last year at school. And in Portugal, to apply for university, you do it after your final exams. You do it in like July, like August time of like after your school's done. So it's like you have your grades, you apply, versus
Quite a short application time then, because they must know like, oh, they've got 3 A's.
Yeah.
From here.
Yeah. So it's literally like you have to have like like each university has their own grading that they would expect for certain degrees. But it's like, okay, you don't really have to worry too much until the end of the year. Versus in England, it was like, okay, you have to apply and then you get a conditional offer, right? And then you have to like maintain those grades or improve those grades. And it just added a massive amount of stress to like that final year of school. And I remember my friends sort of not really understanding, like, oh, why you sort of have to maintain these grades, because I think like as an international student, they were asking for very high grades as well, which is
I guess it's the English literature as well, because English isn't it is kind of your first language, but they might not know that from
yeah.
an Portuguese applicant.
Yeah, I had to do the whole like language exam, even with a New Zealand passport. Like it wasn't enough. You still had to like prove that I like my
Because it's a
English.
different language. It's like American English,
Yeah, they didn't trust that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of narrowed my choices of universities down, and my dad and I came over. My dad, my stepmother, and I came over, and we did a little road trip, and like went to all the universities to decide where to like actually even apply to and what I liked. And I remember I didn't even apply to any university in London. Actually, I made that choice very early on that I didn't see myself moving to London as a first sort of place.
Mm.
And I ended up sort of deciding on Canterbury. Not super well known, obviously. It was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people when I said that, but it was mainly because it was quite similar to where I grew up in terms of size of town. It was near a beach, or you could get to the beach on like a short bus trip or like a 10K run if you wanted to. But it was
getting back though.
yeah, getting back you get the bus. But it was very comparable. Like I could walk everywhere. It felt like very it was like it was very it was like a safe, maybe a comfortable choice perhaps. It was like it wasn't necessarily going to be a huge leap into like a massive city. It was like campus university. So it all in all, it just sort of ticked all those boxes for me of like jumping into the unknown, but there was enough of like the known mixed in.
The comfortable step. But because I don't know, I've not been to Canterbury, but I don't think I have anyway. I've not spent any time in there. I probably didn't through it on the way to Dover or something. But what part of Portugal are you from then, just for reference?
So I'm from a city called Aveiro, and that's sort of between Porto and Lisbon, right on the coast, like beaches 10 minutes away. It's again the sort of place where you grow up, you walk everywhere. I didn't, you don't need a driver's license. You can literally just walk over to your friend's place for the most part, or cycle over to the beach, and it's super safe, super small. You sort of grow up, the same people your whole life. You're friends with everyone since like preschool up until like you graduate. So it's a very it's a very sort of small city. I would say maybe
community as opposed to a city.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say now I think it's become quite touristy in a way, so it has grown. But it was when I grew up, it wasn't like on the map, let's say. So it was small.
Okay. And just to hop back at one point, so your parents both teach English literature, and they're telling you not to study it in Portugal. Does not really fill me with confidence that they're good at their job.
I think, in fact, they both said they're the best, and I couldn't have them as my lecturers, so I had to go elsewhere.
I mean, that's a good save from their point of view.
That is literally.
We can't teach you. It's not ethical.
Yeah, that's literally what they told me.
Wow, and then. So I guess you obviously moved significantly before Brexit happened. So I'm guessing the whole process was quite seamless.
Super seamless. I remember, I got my, I got like the final offer in from the university. I like accommodation. Obviously, it was like the first year was on campus, with it being like a campus university. So like you just sort of pick within that, and I literally just packed 2 suitcases, and my mum flew over with me, helped me set up, and I think I sort of moved in maybe on like day 1 of Freshers Week, which I had no idea what that was.
Oh right, yeah.
That was my first cultural shock.
And then after Canterbury, did you go home, or did you start your masters, or did you do something between?
Yeah, no, I decided to do my masters straight after. I felt like if I had a break, I probably would never go back to do it. And I think that was probably right. I don't think I would have. So yeah, then I ended up going to Oxford. So I went to Oxford for my masters, and stayed there for a couple of years as well.
It's a great city.
It is. It really
From my
is.
favorite place, apart from where I grew up in the country, in terms of a city to live in, probably where I'd love to live, if possible.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't mind
then
going back.
and then after that, finding work. How was that? What did you have to do in terms of work-wise? Was
Um,
it because you graduated?
so it was an interesting time, I think, because when literally the day I graduated from my master's was Brexit Day. I remember waking up. Yeah, I remember the day I woke up from my graduation, looked at my phone. I was like, oh no, because everyone thought like it's not gonna happen. There's no way. And yeah, so yeah, literally graduation day was everything everyone was speaking about. Just like Brexit, what does this mean? Almost everyone on my course was international, and it was just like, what now? And I remember because you had to like apply, or I think I'd already had like my national insurance to like start working, but it was almost like everything's so unknown that I didn't worry to begin with. So I had like my first few jobs in Oxford. I didn't think about any sort of implications. My parents were quite worried. I think they were always like, what does this mean? Are you going to come back? But ultimately, once they sort of then mentioned this sort of settled status or that you could apply for residency, I remember calling to like know what do I need to do to get this residency or like settled status or whatever it was at the time. And I was told, interestingly, and maybe it still stings a little bit, the way they said it was that I had been a burden to the system for the sort of 4 years when I was studying because I wasn't working and I had access to like the NHS. So I wasn't paying any national insurance or anything, which meant that, yeah, to the system, those years couldn't count towards applying for like the official like settled status or anything. So
It's interesting that because I think of like I get that point of you're not having income, so you're not paying income tax or national insurance, but you're still paying sales tax, you're still paying other taxes.
yeah, and all the
Still
money into the
contributing to
university.
exactly, and you are funding an economy in learning and higher education.
Yeah.
So for me, it feels stupid because also my friend who's South African, he got an ancestry visa for the United Kingdom, and his master's year counted.
Ah,
I think.
well, interesting because I remember in having a New Zealand passport, I thought, oh, it's like Commonwealth, surely it's easy. And they said no, like if anything, it was probably more difficult. And I remember even when I once was arriving into Portugal and my Portuguese passport, I think, had expired, or I was sort of between passports, and I didn't even think about it, and I had my New Zealand one, and I was at the border control, and I showed them that, and they're like, well, what are you doing here? And I said, I work here. And they're like, well, where's your visa? I was like, I don't have one. Because I mostly travel on my Portuguese passport. So I had to show them Portuguese ID, and they called like the manager and then eventually said like, okay, yeah, you're fine. Next time, bring the other passport. Just, even if it has expired, like just make sure you have both. It's just fair. But
I mean, that is such I guess, a unique problem for dual nationality citizens, but one which most people won't have thought about. So
yeah.
thank you for that insight.
Yeah, just never know. It didn't even cross my mind. It's like, oh, yeah, of course. I can't just be in the UK on a New Zealand passport without a visa.
Yeah, that to me seems bonkers.
I know,
Yeah.
same. But yeah, here we are. I've been working now for over 5 years, so I've got my settled status, and I can, what is it, like indefinite leave to remain.
Would you? I guess you can't really have a third passport. Would you give one up?
No, I
guess
wouldn't.
the UK one's getting worse or getting less valuable or
Yeah,
powerful.
it doesn't appeal. Doesn't appeal right now. Maybe at some point. Yeah.
And God save the King could be a reason to. Perfect. Well, I think that's unless you have anything more to add of how you got to the UK, I think that's a good overall picture of your life so far.
Yeah, I think nothing else.
So welcome back to the podcast and welcome to section 2, all about being there. So Kate, now we know how you got to the UK. This is where we kind of dig in a bit deeper and scratch surfaces and see your, I guess, opinions of the countries or places you've lived, and kind of just do a cultural comparison from home or from, I guess, you can also throw in the cultures within New Zealand that you know of. So let's start with Canterbury. You arrived from the plane. It's fresh as week. What is that like? Because the Freshers Week is mad anyway.
Yeah, it was so funny because yeah, maybe even like explain what Freshers Week is. What would you say it is? It's just a week of madness to begin university life.
Normally it's 2 weeks,
Ah,
so it's not even 1 week. When it was in Liverpool, where I did my bachelor's, and it's effectively one big meet and greet, because usually you've got, I don't know, every single fresh-faced 18-year-old or 19-year-old coming into halls, living away from home for the first time, working out how a pan works, or the dishwasher or the washing machine, how to go buy groceries, the usual stuff. And you're thrown in with a lot of people the same age, and lots of parties which are planned for the week. So you spend a lot of money if you're me.
yes, yes, that's basically what it was. I remember, yeah, my mum and I arrived and we sort of, I don't know if we maybe had a day or we sort of went like shopping, I guess I didn't have like pillows or I didn't come over with any bedding and you had to like pick up all of that stuff. But I remember actually before I moved, being like an international university, they'd like paired me with like another international student. So like we could have like one person we each knew like arriving at university, even like we weren't on the same course or anything. And in a way, it was a way of like, oh, what accommodation have you gone for, or, what are you going to get the wristband for the Freshers Week? And this literally stuck in my head because I remember, as I said, I didn't really know what it was. I remember, it said like, yeah, a lot of parties and this and that, and it felt like, oh, I guess I can decide each day if I want to go. And this other girl I had spoken to, she said, "Oh, I'm not going. I don't see the point." And and when I arrived, I think it was the biggest mistake was not getting that wristband,
Mm.
because you immediately felt a little bit left out. So I think when I moved, obviously living in halls, you sort of lumped in with like, I think I was with like 6 other people. And everyone's like super different. I think everyone I lived with was English. Actually, no, there was one German guy. Everyone else was actually English. So for them, it was all expected. And I remember like that first day and first night, I literally didn't even know what was going on. Like what's happening? Like, what is this? What are you guys doing? And it was all a bit scary, actually. I remember obviously my mum had left and you sort of left alone. And I'm sure probably the same feeling that regardless of having moved from another country, it still feels a bit daunting to have your own little room with these other strangers, and sort of breaking the ice and getting to know everyone. But yeah, Freshers Week was a learning curve. It was really good. Like I think like I understand why English universities do that. Like a Freshers Week to like break the ice, you get everyone sort of to let loose a little bit, get to know the people they live with. You learn, as you said, all those sort of things. You sort of ease into university life and that sort of life of living for the most part by yourself. Yeah.
And usually it's a good, I guess the Freshers Week for me was about 10 days before my first class.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it meant if you moved city or country, you kind of knew how to live.
Yeah.
Before work.
Exactly. So it was like the sort of time where you suddenly get, you have enough time to sort out like the admin things. So when I moved, I didn't have an English bank account. And I remember that was actually quite difficult because I needed to have proof, like a sort of letter or something with my address. And I didn't have it. And then obviously every other 18-year-old is getting a bank account, having moved a lot of people abroad. There was a lot of people that were international at this university. And I had like a wait time of like a week or so, or maybe it was 2 weeks to actually get a bank account. And, it's things that maybe, this was like 2011, right? So I guess now with things like Monzo and Revolut and all these things, it wouldn't be an issue.
I mean, that's how I survived here, was because it took me 4 months to get a bank account in Sweden.
Yeah, it was mad. It was something I'd never even considered. So that in itself, you have a week to be like, okay, what do I need to figure out? What do I need to do? And by the time classes start, you're like, okay, I sort of know my way around. Some familiar faces around me. Doesn't feel as scary. But yeah, I remember I think when I did move over, I always felt that living in Portugal with a name like Kate and not looking particularly Portuguese um, meant that I did sort of feel like an outsider when I was there. I literally never really felt like I fit in, like truly. I think a lot of times you'd go out and maybe, especially in Lisbon, or like a bigger city, people would speak to me in English. And it would only be when I would then speak in Portuguese and like flawless Portuguese accent that you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, you're Portuguese.
You're one of us.
Yeah, basically. And
I guess that's quite useful for knowing if someone's talking about you behind your back, like, oh,
absolutely.
this person over here.
Yeah, it would happen.
Like, obrigado. No.
Yeah, or if you want to get out of something, you can just speak in English. No one knows any different. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I wondered to an extent if when I moved to England, if I would feel any different. Because I guess when I was growing up, I didn't necessarily watch the same TV shows as my friends did, like the Portuguese shows. I would watch a lot of the English ones. And a lot of the TV I watched was probably English, or, any sort of movies, I wouldn't watch the Portuguese, like dubbed versions. I would watch all the English ones. So when my friends would be singing the sort of Disney theme songs, they would sing the Portuguese versions. And I'd be like,
Something I didn't realize was a thing until I was here in Sweden, and I went out whilst I was with my work colleagues, and Under the Sea started playing, and I was like, oh, I know this one. And then it was all in Swedish.
yeah.
And I was like, what? They've ruined the song.
I know.
And all my Swedish friends were singing along, and I was like, this is not right. No.
That's what I grew up with. I'm like, this isn't right. Like, the accents aren't right. This is wrong. And it was, yeah, I guess I never really felt like truly Portuguese. Like, I didn't get all of the same references. I was clearly that sort of kid that was between two cultures. And this is so mad. I remember being, I don't know, like 7 years old, and our teachers asking us to like fill in this like form of when you're learning about breakfast and lunch and dinner and bedtime. And I put in, I don't know, maybe like my bedtime was like 8:30 or something like that.
Right.
Maybe even a 7:30. I don't know. It was really early. And my teacher came over to me separately and was like, I think you did this wrong. I was like, no, that's literally when I go to bed. And
not dinner time.
It's literally, I didn't get them wrong. And my friends would mock me and be like, oh, I if you go to bed at that time, I'm still having dinner at 9:30. I was like, well, I'm not the kid with bags under my eyes. But it's like super different culturally. Like I think I couldn't understand, when people would say those things to me. I was like, my way felt normal. I guess you don't know any different. But yeah, I guess when I moved to England, I still felt completely in between cultures because obviously I still didn't have any of the English references. I didn't, when I was in New Zealand, I didn't have the same references either, and I didn't have a New Zealand accent, so I was also never a Kiwi. So it's like just embrace the international person that I am, maybe.
I think that's a really good point of like feeling displaced constantly, because I think I know I've got a lot of friends here whose parents left like Yugoslavia, or what was it, the Baltic countries, as things were happening, and they still, have a strong connection to Croatia or Serbia or Bosnia, wherever they're from. And when I talk to them, they're like, "Oh no, I grew up in Sweden, but I am Croatian or I am Bosnian," and they go home a lot. But then they feel kind of like, as you're saying, like you don't know which nationality you assimilate with.
Yeah.
But it's also it's a blessing and a curse, because as I said, fitting in can be difficult, but then fitting in can be really easy, I guess, in other cases, because you have mutual interests or some kind of connection with many people.
Yeah.
You can make friends as you're an adult, maybe more than a child.
Yeah, but I mean, and I completely agree. It was more so that, when you're younger, you really just want to fit in. And the sort of older you get, you realize, why, I guess being international isn't a bad thing, not necessarily fitting into a culture just means you actually have more cultures to pull from in a way. So I sort of don't see it as a bad thing. Obviously, I see it as something that was just a learning experience in a way of.
No, and you I hope you never do see it as a bad thing, because it's such a wonderful thing to have the ability to be so empathetic to 3 different nations now, or nationalities now, which is, such a lucky perspective to have.
Yeah.
So I guess we've done fresh this week. What was it like, I guess, then? So I was obviously socializing. Once you've learned some references, was it quite easy? Because I'm guessing your English language level was basically fluent.
Yeah, I think it was like the comfortable choice, obviously coming to England, because obviously, yeah, English literature made sense to be in England, but also I wasn't coming from a place that I needed to learn another language. I did have probably all the mistakes that a lot of foreign people do in terms of, I don't know, being told we were going to the Shakespeare's Globe, and me asking how to get to Southwark.
I mean, I got Bicester Bicester when I first moved
Yeah.
out. So even in England, you have that problem, no worry.
So, it's all like, what are you, I don't understand what these people are telling me. It's all part of the fun, I guess. And I, occasionally, I think when I moved to England, it would happen a lot more in English, that people would be like, you're saying that's not how you say it. Or like, to me, what I think it was like, and I genuinely have to stop and think about this so I don't say it wrong still, but drum and bass. For all of my life, I probably would have just called it like drum and bass. And yeah. And I just, it's the sort of things that you say in your head, but no one's ever called you out. Like, you've never maybe said it out loud. You just read these things. And so eventually I'd
Very
have...
good point.
Yeah.
Did you learn English spellings of English words, or was it the American spellings as well?
I think for the most part, always English. And I
You add a lot more
remember...
letters.
Yeah, I was quite conscious about that with the C's and Z's and S's and whatever.
Adding U's everywhere.
Yes, of course.
But also, on that, I've got a few Spanish friends, and they learn through reading books. And then I was asking them some questions. And then my friend David would always like add an extra ed at the end of every single word, like compounded it. And
Yeah.
that's just how I read it. Like, because in English it's a nuance, or like a bomb or a comb. You don't know it's a silent B because you've only read it and you just know that word is. It's a comb for your hair, or
Yeah. No, I guess, like, because I did speak in English with my dad. It was never that bad, but it was very much like in my head I was probably still thinking in Portuguese, and so I almost, like, you sort of slightly slower to like think about things. Where writing, I had no problems. I think like that was fine. It was more like I didn't speak English necessarily every day, so it's just the shift of, oh, okay, well, now I'm doing everything in English.
Yeah. And do you now think in English or dream in English, or is it Portuguese, or both?
It has changed. It 100% has changed. I think I do think and dream everything in English now. But I think when I go home, like for like a week, you start to see it change back. But yeah, it's brutally changed. Like, everything is English these days.
That's how I imagine, like, you're fluent in a language, or like it's competent when you can start thinking for yourself in that language or dreaming in it.
Yeah, I think my dad once made this joke. Maybe he was serious about it. Of like, I think when you know a language, when you know how to say a really random word like coat hanger.
Oh, really? So I should learn. Actually, I've got a Swedish dictionary somewhere around. Actually, it's right here. Let me find out what coat hanger is in Swedish.
Yeah, and then it struck me the other day. It's like, I don't know if I remember what it's called in Portuguese. I'm not fluent anymore.
What is it in Portuguese, or you haven't be forgotten?
I'd say like cabiz is how I'd call it. But it genuinely took me like, oh my God, I'm not a Portuguese person if I don't remember how to say this.
This is going to be such good for the podcast. Me just looking around, looking for the word coat hanger. No, I can't find.
Pressure is on.
Oh, coat hanger. Here we go. Galg. Galge.
You are now fluent in Swedish.
I know. God, just my SFE. I passed it all.
Done.
Wonderful. Yes, the next question I have is about kind of working in England. I'm assuming you didn't work in Portugal because you were still pre-university age, but
no,
culturally you still have a view of Portuguese working culture. How was the UK different?
It's a good question. I feel like thinking about it now, I always had this idea that in Portugal I think like you do tend to work longer hours, or obviously not every industry. I would say like I work in tech now, and I see like my brother's husband sort of does the same, is like a similar role, and I see his sort of working hours are now very similar to mine. It's like it's really I think like it's probably changed over time, where now every sort of company in Portugal, if they're like a tech-based company, they also have to they also want to attract international talent as well. So it's very similar to what you have in England, of a sort of 9 to 6 p.m. or 9 to 5, same sort of thing. So in terms of like that aspect of it is now the same. But I just remember thinking, like this is maybe like a slightly off topic in terms of work, but in Portugal you grow up realizing that you can just go to the shops at any time, or like everything is just open longer. Like shopping centers would be open until like 11 p.m. So if I finish work, I can just go still shopping after work. Versus here in England, like you finish work and you're like, most places are like closed at like 6. So that was something that to me even was like something I had to get used to, of like, I'm working now, so I can't just go and do all of these things after work. I can't go to the bank after work. I can't, everything just closes. Whereas in Portugal, you sort of get a bit more used to, oh, I can just pop out and do my errands like a bit later. Not everything, obviously the bank does close and post office does, but for the most part, you'd be able to do everything after work, which, yeah, obviously in England, you definitely can't do it.
I mean, it's interesting because I've lived in cities mostly, and only when I moved to Leamington Spa was when I noticed that, okay, everything closed at 5. But I'm used to like being able to do anything after work, and you still can in like supermarkets and things. But
yeah,
when I came here to Sweden, nothing was open. Like on a Sunday, things are just closed. People don't do anything. Yeah, I had to do all like go to the tax agency, everything else during work hours. Go to the bank, and work were like, it's fine. You've got to go and do it. And I was like, what? I can just leave and do life admin? Like, yeah. Otherwise you can't do your job if you can't do life admin. So.
Yeah, it's such a weird one, because it you almost feel a bit guilty if it's like, no, I have to do this and I can't do it at any other time. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think there's so much now about working in Portugal that I don't know in terms of like benefits that they give you for I don't even know, like tax things that I hear like friends now talk about. I'm like, wow, I'm so out of the loop now that it's almost a bit alien to me. But in some ways, I don't know if it would appeal to me to like go and work from Portugal. I like being able to like work from there, but in some ways, I don't know how well I'd also like adapt now. And I feel like language-wise, because I've never worked in Portugal, I don't really have like the business vocabulary to speak and like do all my work things in Portuguese, which is also it's like trying to explain your job to like your parents in a different language. You're like, I don't know how to say this.
Is your dad fluent in Portuguese then?
He is. Yeah, he's definitely fluent, but he does not talk if he can avoid it. So I don't think I could ever speak to my dad in Portuguese. I think I would just laugh too much is one thing, but
not unless you want to talk about some other family members. You have that as a backup.
Maybe
I guess Kiwi family members, that is.
Yeah. Maybe we have done that while abroad, yes, but that would be like the one thing. It's because otherwise you're like, no, it's too weird to speak to in Portuguese. It's too unnatural.
Wow. And then is there anything else which like shocked you between Portugal and the UK? You can say no, it's fine.
I don't think so. I mean, I think because of when I moved and having moved for university, I feel like a lot of those like things that maybe were shocking would have been regardless, because it was still moving away from home, right? It was just everything was in a different language.
You chose to move that bit further.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I guess we'll call a conclusion to section 2. Thank you. And we'll see you for section 3. So hey, and welcome to section 3 of the podcast, which I still haven't actually named, but it's effectively a recap of your time in the UK. So I guess the first question I usually ask is if you could go back to the day you moved and you could tell yourself something or give yourself some advice, would you give yourself some advice first of all? And if so, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I've probably got quite a bit of advice I think I would give myself. Do you know what? There's like a few things that I have actually thought about. And like over time they still like pop into my head now. And maybe like one thing I do remember like finding quite hard in moving was making friends, which maybe sounds like a bit silly, but I think as I was saying, I didn't come from like a particularly big town. Most of my friends were people like I'd known for like 10, like 15, like basically like my whole life when I was there. Lived in the same house like my whole life, same city, like had never moved. And suddenly you're in this new place. And it's not friends that you sort of have from school that you see every day, right? As anyone going to university, you know that you might end up being friends with the people you live with in halls and like your accommodation. You might end up maybe being friends with people on your course. But those friendships don't just sort of develop from nothing. You have to put in the effort. And I remember at the time, in a way, maybe I was sort of in my head thinking, oh, I'm not going to stay here. I don't necessarily have to like invest in these friendships because I've got all my friends back home. And it was a terrible way of looking at it because, regardless of thinking you weren't going to stay, you still need people around you that'll support you. And like that you need that, if you need a friendship group and sort of a support network. And I remember calling my brother and he's like 3 years older than me, and asking him like, how do you make friends? Like, like as an adult, it was like, I don't know anymore. And I guess, yeah, I think like what I really learned from that was to just, I guess, move out of your comfort zone a little bit, like join groups. Like the main reason I joined volleyball was like I enjoyed it, and I sort of felt like that would bring that sort of other friendship group and some activity with like-minded people that would at least have one shared interest or sort of hobby with me.
Yeah.
And I think that was like the best thing I could have ever done for like my university life. And I only joined, I think, towards the end of my second year maybe, or third year even. And I would like go back and say like, join a sports team or join any team from like the beginning as soon as like you can, like join different groups, join like different things, and just expose yourself to like those things where you are interested in. And you'll eventually find these people who, they're people that you do, as I said, like share a hobby with. So they're not just these people that you live with, or they're not the people that you studied with. They're literally people who you'll bond over something that maybe you'll do together like in the future outside of university. So that was like definitely one thing. I learned from it when I went into my master's. I joined volleyball again.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You can't like just go to someone, hey, you're my friend, like when you're 6 or 10 or maybe even 15 if you're lucky. But
I think it's also like you realize that not everyone is, you're also not going to want to be friends with everyone. And I think I didn't always appreciate that when I'd moved, is like, I'm probably not going to be friends with all these people just because we studied together. Or, I have to also be the one saying like, do you want to grab a coffee after class, or do you want to do something? Or, it's like, if you don't do that and they don't do that, you're never going to see these people.
Yeah. It's kind of like you have to ask on a friend date or something.
Yeah. It's literally.
It's still quite unnerving to do. I know, because I had a similar thing where I grew up in a small village or town outside of the city. And all my friends, like my best friends from home, I've known since I was like 4, and they're still my really close friends. And then going to university, okay, I knew my housemates, but I don't actually speak to any of the people I lived with in first year. I speak to people I lived with in second year and third year. But most of my friends came from volleyball. Like, you are the, I think, 4th person I've had on this podcast who I've met playing volleyball. Which is surreal, and the probably won't be the last. It's shown how how international the sport is, and B, how, as you said, how great it is to use sports or hobbies or some kind of social, I guess, fluid, whether it's the dance class or something is the way to break the ice, because you're not asking awkward questions or holding a drink in your hand. It's let's play this thing, and you instantly unlock some vocabulary and some talking points.
Yeah, and I think with anything as well that pushes you slightly outside your comfort zone, you're immediately sort of pushing yourself to do something that is a bit different, and that is probably, I'm going to go up and speak to these people because I'm here by myself and we're already doing this together, so I might as well like speak to them a bit more. And maybe if you were sort of just within the comfort zone and sort of trying to play it safe, you wouldn't even go up to speak to those people. So already sort of challenging yourself means you're a lot more open to like anything that's like a new opportunity maybe. So I like language courses, anything you want, like just world's your oyster.
That's great. And I think, well, again, going back to that, for me, I made a really good friend, Ethan, or like one of my best friends, was after volleyball, we just always go to the pub and like watch football or play FIFA or eat chips and cheese because we're without basic. But we kept doing it like most weeks. And then, we're still close now. And he's actually just been traveling on New Zealand. So
yeah, great. But I mean, I was going to say, because even the same applies with when I moved to London eventually, you're like, again, in this big city, you know a few people maybe from university, and you're still like, oh, you do still need to make friends. Like, yeah, you can make some friends from work, and they do end up being a sort of bulk of your friendship group, I guess. But it's still, you still have to put in the effort. You know, you still have to think like, oh, do I even like these people? You know, will you sort of adopt them as your friends or no? And when
in the limbo zone of just co-worker or friend, or
yeah, exactly. Like once you don't work together, do you still see them? And yeah, I mean, even I bonded with some friends on like previous roles through volleyball as well. You know, it's the glue that holds everyone together.
I mean, you keep inviting me to this thing in London. I still haven't been. I should probably try and get.
You should. Yeah, you should. Yeah, but I was going to say as well, one thing that I would tell myself, to be fair, I stick by this in the sense of like if you're moving to like a country and you only really know like the main, or, you know, everyone knows like the main city, you know, I think people also need to remember that it's okay to go somewhere that no one else knows about. You know, in a way, I remember thinking and feeling that a lot of people were sort of asking, why, oh, you're going to England? Are you going to London? Or like, no, because I genuinely never wanted to move to London as a first experience because I felt like it was going to be too big a culture shock. I'd just be swallowed up. I was probably not really going to enjoy it. And, you know, other cities...
Very expensive.
Yeah, also very, very expensive, yes. But it was almost like, you know, other cities can be really nice. And a lot of people, if you're moving to a new country, maybe like the biggest city, feels like the safer option, where actually you might have a nicer experience going somewhere that's still easily accessible, but, you know, maybe you'll get more of like a community feel, or maybe you'll get more of like this sort of real experience. And I think that really like contributed to me like even enjoying those first few years in England.
That's a very good point. I think, as you mentioned, that there's more to a country than its kind of top tourist spots. And if you're going to live there as well, you're not a tourist all the time. You're a resident, so you need to go somewhere where it actually works for you. And the UK's got so many beautiful places.
Yeah,
it's Liverpool in particular,
of course,
and Oxford. But,
but, you know, it's like the luxury of, I don't know, living in Oxford, and you can just pop over to the Cotswolds or somewhere like gorgeous, and you don't really get that as much in London. Obviously, you still can, but
the river's so nice to just cycle along the towpath.
Yeah,
and the architecture is incredible. And you still have all the amenities of London. Plus, it's only an hour away on the bus or the train, so it's not that far.
Yeah, so it's just open-mindedness. I'd say key thing. Explore.
And it's probably easier to get to from Heathrow than most parts of London.
Actually, it really is. It really is. Canterbury was only an hour away as well.
Yeah, well, Canterbury's in the east, right?
Yeah.
So Gatwick would be where you went.
Yeah, true, Gatwick.
So this is quite London-specific geography here. So.
Challenging me as well.
And then, what advice would you give someone leaving Portugal?
Apart
from doing it, maybe.
Do you mean leaving Portugal to go anywhere else?
Yeah, anywhere in the world. We learn a second language because Brazil's Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the thing is most people in Portugal have pretty good English. So it's like pretty safe to assume that most places you'll get by with English. Um, Even if you don't know like you in Sweden, you can get by with English, right?
Yeah, and my Spanish colleagues, my German colleagues, they all speak English.
Yeah.
A lot of
So
learning Swedish, but English is the international language, which is
yeah,
why people like me find it hard to learn other languages because no one just wants to talk English to you.
yeah, it's
But
true. But
some of us do try, and I'm
I
one.
Swedish strikes me as quite a hard one actually. But
It's very similar to German, just with a weird accent. Well, not weird, it's just different. Sorry,
yeah.
sweet.
You know what? I would actually say the main thing I would also say to someone leaving Portugal is the weather will most likely also be a shock in most places. Coming to England, like the I don't know, the hours of daylight is just depressing. Apart from in the summer.
I've left England and thought it's more depressing where I am now.
Yeah. If you
So I
like
don't.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult. The first winter was especially difficult, but I think to give the UK its credit, we're a lot more sociable in the winter, especially because the drinking culture is a lot more like, let's go for one drink. Here, it's not so much. It's very much like being. You don't really drink in the week, and then you drink a lot of the week in the week, where it becomes more like freeing, I guess, or like you're celebrating the finish of the weekend. I can't even speak. Yeah, which made it a bit easier. But yeah, it's interesting to think about daylight, and it took this long to talk about the weather, which is I'm so proud of you.
It was hard.
It's been there like in your head, weather.
See, maybe it's me becoming English now.
Yeah, but English, you just mentioned it in 6 seconds. So.
It's true. It's true. I'll give myself a pat on the back. Yeah, no, it's probably the most depressing thing of having moved to England is lack of sunshine and going home and being told how even more pale than normal you actually look.
Wow. And even less people talking Portuguese to you.
Yes. I'm a true foreigner. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, what a great way to end. One final question, I guess, is would you do it again?
Absolutely. 100%. Moving anywhere I think was super good, like personally. Even like right at 18, it was such like a foundational part of like building your own identity, like away from what you know and just really pushing yourself. And I 100% grew as like a person, and I would recommend it to anyone. Like just even move for like 3 months and you change your view on like everything.
Perfect. And what's the future? Are you going to stay in London for the foreseeable, or?
For now, there's like a little niggle maybe of something there's beneath the surface. I don't know.
If you can move anywhere tomorrow,
somewhere warm and sunny. It's sort of like because of like work. Where I work mostly with people from Stockholm, Gibraltar, and Malta. And I wouldn't say no to spending like a few months working from the Malta office.
Malta's nice. Is it in Valletta?
Yeah, Sliem.
Valletta's good.
Yeah, it is nice. Like office by the beach, you literally look out at the ocean. So I wouldn't say no to that for a little while.
Go work in Popeye's village.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, no, I do not see myself living in England for the rest of my life. Let's put it that way.
So going somewhere warm, like a bird in winter flying south.
Yes, that is me.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's So thank you, Kate, for joining me for this, or indulging me on this podcast journey I decided to go down on. And yeah, it's so nice to finally ask you a lot of like deep personal questions, which I never really asked you through knowing you so long. It's always been around like going out or volleyball and stuff. It's never been about your background or your childhood or your story. So thank you for sharing that all with me. I never knew that your parents were lecturers of of what you studied, and even then taught you. So that was really quite good fun to understand that. And as I've said with most of my guests now, it's like such a wonderful thing to have a conversation about the topic so deeply. And I think you learn quite a lot about the person you're talking to. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. No, it's been great.
Wonderful. And I don't know if you want to like share your socials or anything for people to find you. That's really precious.
I'm happy for people to follow. I used to have my own travel blog. It's not so active these days, but it still
Could be a
exists. Yeah, Tracking Kate I used to be.
Oh,
Still are. I
just
still am. Yes, I'm still tracking the world, but yeah, less actively blogging myself these days. But traveler at
perfect. And if you did find something fun or interesting or useful in the podcast, please let us know in the comments. Please let us know on social. And as always, please like, share, subscribe. There's even a Patreon now, so you can follow and support me on that if you wish to. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you next time.